We are rolling. The first question I ask everybody is give me your first and last name and then the years that you participated with the Atlanta student movement. And remember, you never hear my voice, so give me a complete sentence.
Okay.
Look straight at me.
Okay, I'm thinking. Okay. Um, my name is Ann Ruth Borders Patterson, and I participated in the student movement from its beginning, which was 1960, through my graduation from Spelman in 1961. However, being a native Atlantan, whenever I returned to Atlanta, there was the economic boycott going on, so I continued to participate in that, marching or doing whatever was necessary.
Now, whatever was necessary, that's a broad phrase. You were from Atlanta's elite African American community. You were well educated, you were well spoken, and you were going to jail. Miss Patterson.
Yes, I did, during the absolute first movement, help to plan and organize and solicit students, beg students from Spelman to participate, um, uh, acknowledging and reminding them that this was very serious and there was no question if you would come out for the sit-in, which was being planned, that you had to be committed to nonviolence. But that was also true if you were even just marching. You had to be committed to all the principles of nonviolence. I did say that especially when we decided we were going to sit in, you could be, anything could happen. So I myself prepared that it could even be death. Um, so that's what happened at the very beginning, as we were planning and asking people to join us. Now, during the economic boycott, sometimes people were picking up toys, clothes, because we had asked people to turn in their Riches and Macy's credit cards and not to shop downtown. That's what I mean by the economic boycott. So there was delivery of food. Now, of course, I was returning from Boston where I was teaching at that time in the summers and sometimes during the holidays. So if it meant making placards for the, or signs for marching, that's what I mean by whatever was necessary.
Well, let's go back to the economic boycott. The whole idea of taking on riches, most of the adults thought the kids were crazy, right?
I think the adults thought the kids were crazy taking on riches. Actually, I think many of the adults thought we were not with it, as we did indeed stage that mass sit-in on March 15, 1960. Our college professors and administrators were not necessarily in agreement, and I think many didn't tell our parents, so we didn't want to get in trouble that way. And in fact, I don't think that was not known to most people at that time. But as we continued, the community became very supportive, but I'm sure there were older people in the community who thought, as my father would say, what are these children doing, and do these children know what they're doing?
Obviously you did, and one of the things that I've been told is that there was a class system among African Americans at that time, specifically in the colleges, and that the protests brought these classes together. Is that something that you can speak on, that you saw?
A class system among the colleges, I'll have to say, I was totally unaware of at Spelman. There perhaps, I would say there is in the city of Atlanta, but that completely, you were not aware of that. I don't think most students, at least at Spelman, were aware of any kind of class system. We there, many of us were working students, working our way through college to help pay for college. So we were aware that there were some students who, wherever they came from very, very middle-class families, But once they arrived at Spelman, they were just among the rest of us. And so that was not something that was prevalent. And I think in the student movement, there was, if that was something that was prominent, I was not aware of it and definitely not a part of it.
What makes me smile when you say that is everything about you is classy, okay, just across the board. And I can imagine you when you were in college, that you carried yourself with and you know what I'm talking about, okay, that same level of class. Didn't you fear, what was your fear when you started protesting? Because that was an unknown. Nobody had taught you how to protest.
I didn't have any fear as a protester. I was committed to nonviolence. I was committed to writing what I considered a historical from all of my life and all of my family's life that I could learn about a wrong, something that I saw day in and day out as a wrong. As a young kid, I went to elementary school in Atlanta. I always wondered why I had to stack stacks of paper in order not to get the ridges from the desk that were already scratched up by others, because we had desks brought to us from other schools and books as well. I questioned that even in second grade for sure. So I questioned why you sat at the back of the bus, and no matter where the white person was on the bus, even if they decided to sit in row 11, you had to go behind them, though there may be seats from 11 forward to 2. So I questioned all of those kinds of things. I questioned why when we went to Rich's, the water fountains with the black and the white and the bathrooms, and actually I have to wonder if there were, but I guess there were colored bathrooms there. I do remember them being in service stations if they had any facilities at all. So everywhere I went, racism, Jim Crowism was in my face. So just growing up, as I often said, those things were deeply embedded in me, and I once approached about the student movement or participation, no hesitation whatsoever.
How were you approached? Do you remember the first time and who it was and what thoughts ran through your head?
I don't remember that very well, but I would say I was in student government and Rosalind was president of student government. So I would assume it may have been Rosalind who came back to the campus and mentioned her experience at Yates and Milton. And so I think right from the very beginning I was on board, and from that point on I went to the meetings at Trevor Arnett Library, rain or shine, took back to the campus whatever I could to the other students and shared with them. And I remember the first planning was to stage the sitting after the Greensboro. And I do remember many students saying to me, I want to, but I'm afraid of what might happen in my family or to my parents. Or many of them said, well, no, I would like to. And some said, are you kidding? Do what? But many weren't just quick to jump on board.
When we say jump on board, this was one of the most organized protest movements, bar none. SCLC, NAACP. Where did the students get their inspiration? Why were you guys so creatively organized?
I think the students were as thoughtful about what they were doing and as knowledgeable about the history that I just talked about, as well as their own personal histories. I think they were inside wanted to make right, and they were aware of the unequal resources in our schools, in our housing, in our communities in general. So I think that you didn't have to dig very deep, especially among those who came to those meetings, to get a committed group of people who wanted to make improvements and change what was going on in the city of Atlanta.
Now, when we talk about changing what was going on in the city of Atlanta, of course, the movement itself, as you've talked, had different phases. you had the meetings, you had the appeal, and then you had the sit-ins. Tell me about some of the sit-ins that you participated in.
Well, I participated in the very first sit-in and went to jail for that one. And I went to jail at the Union Station. Interestingly, that was an interstate commerce, so I remember being not only the fingerprinting, but being bound over from the city jail to, I guess, the federal or state jail because it was interstate. The train station was interstate. So we had to go for another jail issue, I'll call it. So that always stood out to me. And pause.
Okay.
What did you say? What was the
Well,
other
no,
part?
what I asked was, what were some of the other sit-ins or
Oh,
protests?
okay. So that first sit-in, and everything leading up to it was a major thing, major experience for me. But preparing for it was as well. After that, we did more marches constantly, up and down the business area. And I remember the KKK across the street sometimes marching. I remember other whites on the other side of the street marching. And I often refer to that as they were protesting our protest. That was my coined expression, I guess you could say. That wasn't pleasant, but you look back and you just did it. You walked and you did. I marched at Davidson's, and I think I saw, protesting the lunchroom situation there. Of course.
Start that over again and give me a complete sentence on that, where you marched. I marched at.
Oh, I marched in front of Davidson's on the streets all around there. I think I already said Richie's, which is now Macy's, and I already said just downtown businesses in general. There was McCrory's and those five and dime stores. So almost every march. I also went to sit in at churches where we talked about them as the most segregated places on a Sunday. So I went to, to protest there. I did a lot of mass meetings and speaking out at the various churches around Atlanta. And I felt very strongly that this was after that initial sit-in, that we were engaged in not only desegregating lunch counters or public facilities, but engaged in a serious economic struggle. And I often spoke about that as I talked at mass meetings, wherever they were.
When you look back on what the students accomplished, at one point you were run off the campus and you had to meet in places like Rush Memorial. Why didn't people give up? Why did people like Reverend Boone step up to help you? What was that underlying current of support that kept pushing you forward?
I don't think there was ever any intention among the students of giving up. As you know, other organizations grew out of this organization, such as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I personally, as deeply as I felt about what I was doing, I always felt that the churches had a strong base and a strong role. So I was really happy that some of them opened up to the students, making places available for us to go with our pens and make markers and make placards and so forth. That kind of support was just unyielding and definitely inspiring. Any conversations or meetings we had where we invited people such as Martin Luther King to come and talk were always very inspiring. Of course, his commitment to nonviolence was infectious, I would say. So we were inspired on all of those fronts. And of course, once the economic part, after the jailing and so forth. I think we were inspired by just the regular people in the community who encouraged us and who seemed to feel and share that this was significant. It was no small, just students acting out, just students for a day. I think that was always encouraging as well as inspiring.
Now, when we talk about some of the other people that were involved, there was a law firm headed by Donald Hollowell that had Hal Moore, A.T. Walden, there were several named, Horace Ward. Now, tell me, did you have any interaction with them, and did as a student you understand how important the parts that they played were?
I definitely had some interactions with Attorney Hollowell and Attorney Ward. I do remember Hollowell and others, even the the radio announcer, Alley Pat, and others coming to jail to bond us out of jail.
Okay, stop. Start that whole sentence and then give it to me as a complete sentence. I do remember others. I do remember Don Hollowell and others coming.
Oh, I do remember Attorney Hollowell, as I said, who came to bond us out of jail. Alley Pat, the radio personality, was one of those who helped with that. I remember many others. I remember Dr. Warner, who was the physician at Spelman, his role in supporting us financially, us at least supporting the student movement financially. There were just numerous people, and I can't name all. Of course, the ministers, the local ministers, and what they did through their churches, Reverend Boone, Reverend Borders, Reverend King. Those are the names that come to my head immediately.